Hey guys, Omni here. There's a couple of things floating around the internet that actually sparked me to want to come and make a video on my thoughts about these things. So this isn't a typical reaction. If anything, this might turn into a rant. There's a couple of articles and reports circulating making the rounds right now, regarding the status of the Flash and the status of Ezra Miller and his involvement in the Flash, the upcoming DCEU, or now known as the Worlds of DC, film that has been on their roadmap for years now, since the launch of Justice League and his casting as Barry Allen in this universe. And its production on this thing has been rocky. We've had people jump ship on writing the script. We've had changes of directors. The current directors are still holding on. Currently attached to the film still is John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. They have been responsible for things like Game Night and most notably Homecoming recently for Marvel. DC and Warner Brothers are hitting this point where they're starting to finally pick up pace. They're trying to pick up the pieces from their failed attempt at kickstarting this universe. Now, the thing that a lot of people are focusing on here with the success of these recent films is that they're marketed as disconnected. They're not. They are still part of the DCEU. When Warner Brothers is talking about they're not focusing on the greater universe. They're not focused on creating a shared universe or a connected shared universe between these films. All that means is that the stories to the individual films, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, are self-contained. They still exist in the timeline of the movies that they've set up until this point. And even in Aquaman, they have that's just one, but they have a reference in the script out of Jason Momoa's mouth, and Mira's mouth for that matter, that calls back to Steppenwolf. They even say that you defeated Steppenwolf in that movie. They are not denying the previous movies existed. So these characters, Superman, Batman, Henry Cavill, and Ben Affleck's respectively versions of these characters exist in this world. The only known Elseworlds movie that does not connect to the DC cinematic universe as it currently stands is the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film. Aside from all other reports, Aquaman, Aquaman 2, Wonder Woman 1984, all of these films, and Shazam included, are included in the same bubble universe as the DCEU, and people are completely misunderstanding what Warner Brothers' statements towards this shift in focus as, oh, these movies are no longer part of that universe. They are independent. Yes, they are independent in the way they are not team-up movies. They are not doing the Marvel thing and having X person show up in Y person's movie every time they show up. They're living their lives. They're doing their own stories, but they still are under the blanket, the umbrella of the DC cinematic universe. That hasn't changed. Warner Brothers has admitted this has not changed. Their focus has changed because, as with the original films, excluding Man of Steel and partially Wonder Woman, aside from the beginning and ending of that film, could be largely argued as being disconnected. But from BVS into Justice League and even Suicide Squad, they all hinged on building this universe, and that was the mistake. We never got any personal stories with these characters. We were introduced to most of them through some other film as either a guest character or a shared character or shared screen time film, like with BVS was our introduction to Wonder Woman. That's what they mean with their shift in focus, because after Man of Steel, that was their focus. Every film after Man of Steel was to set up Justice League. It was to set up this coming together of heroes, rather than build them up individually and let it naturally occur like Marvel did. And that's where it kind of all fell apart, with the lack of performance, people's lack of faith in Zack Snyder's vision, which from the released scripts and stuff we've heard that have been reported about where that would have been, it actually, honestly, I'm not a fan of BVS. I enjoy Justice League for the campiness of it, not in the way that I think it's legitimately a good film. However, the direction that Zack Snyder apparently was going to take it in sounded pretty awesome, and I feel like we may have missed something out because of all the backpedaling of Warner Brothers. Despite all of that, a lot of these characters really, and actors themselves too, have been wanting to make the movies that they signed on to make. Jason Momoa even coming out here recently after the success of Aquaman was like, yeah, I want to see this Snyder cut. F yeah. And then even with Ezra Miller, he's been focused on, despite how you feel about his execution of Barry Allen, because it was a different take. He's a much younger Barry Allen than we would know in the comics, in the versions of that. So it's kind of understandable in a way. He definitely played it differently. And I know that's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but he's proven time and time again, at least in interviews and talking about things he's done outside of the films, whether it be this or Fantastic Beasts. Now, Fantastic Beasts is a whole other story. He's a fan of the material that he is involved in. He immerses himself in these worlds, in this lore. I'm not sure how much of it he knew before going into and accepting these roles, but he's definitely knowledgeable on the subjects of the Harry Potter universe and the DC universe as it stands now, and more than anything, Barry Allen. Now, The Flash's production going forward, originally, according to the original DC roadmap that came out after Justice League, the original title for the Flash movie was going to be Flashpoint. That, in my opinion, is exactly what the DC universe needs, especially since Henry Cavill and his involvement as Superman is, despite any of the PR statements that have come out from both parties, still I get a rocky feeling about the relationship between Cavill and Warner Brothers and whether or not he will be putting on the cape again. We've, in the past month or so, give or take, we finally have official confirmation, even though we've all known it, that Ben Affleck is out as Batman. But the character of Batman will still continue in this universe. And the thing is, when you have already established this connected universe and they're wanting to reboot the pieces of that universe that did not work while maintaining the elements that continued on. The thing is, those elements, Jason Momoa, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, they still exist in the same continuity as this Batman that is no longer around. This Superman that may or may not be coming back. And there is one solution to that built into the canon of the DC universe, and that is the speedsters. That is Flash. In the comics, every time something happens or they get convoluted or whatever, they just have the Flash break the timeline and they can do whatever they want when the universe snaps back together. And they already set this up as happening in BVS when he comes through and that after that quote unquote dream sequence with Bruce. He comes from the future, bringing a warning that, unfortunately, due to the changes in direction, will no longer happen. A lot of the backlash on the statement that Ezra Miller wants to write, and this all starts with an announcement that because Ezra Miller and the directors of the current Flash film and Warner Brothers' direction in taking it on, focusing on the more lighthearted tone, making more fun movies, Ezra Miller has not liked any of the scripts they said. Now, of course, he's an actor. He's signed on, contracted to do what he's supposed to do. However, if the film doesn't start production before May, then his involvement, his contract will be void. It'll be terminated. He will be released. The hold on his contract ends in May. That's why because he loves this character, he loves this universe. He's really trying to make this happen because he's passionate about it. And the thing is, this shift in tone, as we've seen with movies that John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein have done, definitely have a more fun and lighthearted tone. Now, the thing that's getting completely blown out of proportion is that everybody is clinging to this statement that Ezra Miller said about his version of the script that he is writing with comic legend Grant Morrison, who hands down has written one of the greatest Superman stories of all time. All-Star Superman, if that is not something you've read, there's an animated version, not as good as the comic book version, but it is still a solid film. If you haven't seen that, check that out. It is so good. This is a guy that's been in the industry for a long time. He's written so many hits, man. And Ezra knows what he's talking about with it evolves with this universe. Now, the thing everyone is clinging about is the fact that he said his script will have a darker tone. And then everyone's like, well, Barry Allen, the Flash, is a lighthearted character. The movie will have a dark tone in no way means that Barry Allen or the Flash will be made dark. If you've ever read a Flash comic book, Barry Allen and his heart is what pulls him through some of the darkest storylines in all of the DC comics, among a plethora of other things that he's had to deal with in the comics that are really messed up. Just because the character of Barry Allen is a pure, lighthearted soul doesn't mean that he can't deal with something that is messed up. That's all this means. And Flashpoint, the original vision, like I said, coming back to what we talked about before, these actors wanted to create the films that they originally signed on to make. Flashpoint is one of those darker storylines. If you don't know what Flashpoint is, it's an event in the comics in which Barry Allen makes the conscious decision to go back in time and prevent his mother from dying at the hands of Reverse Flash. What this does, it creates a butterfly effect through all time, showing changes, drastic changes to the timeline. So far reaching as the Atlanteans going to war with the Amazons, almost destroying the world. It really throws the world into turmoil. We get events that lead into Bruce being the one that dies in the alley, and his parents become, Thomas Wayne becomes that version of Batman who kills people, and his mother, in complete disarray from her son dying in that alley, goes insane and becomes that timeline's Joker. There's so many variations to go, and it is a really dark storyline. And Barry Allen learns throughout that journey that, despite what happens, despite the terrible tragedies that he's had to suffer in his life growing up, that they are all part of who he is. Without those events, without those things, the world wouldn't be in its current state. It shows really how much importance the fact that if we have the power to change what all the tragedy in our life and rewrite all the perfect moments, like what could that affect in anyone else's life and so on. There's so many like time theory things you can go into with that kind of thing, but basically it's like accept your past is the general lesson you learn at the end of that. As much as we want to change things, sometimes we just can't. And this is a dark storyline, and he does that. And at the end of it all, he goes back, prevents himself from saving his mother, thus, in hopes, turning the timeline back to its original state. What this does, however, is once time has been changed, you can't change it back perfectly. Not again. The Barry Allen in the CW show explains this very well as to why changes to the timeline can always have effects. Because no matter after you change something, just because you set certain events back into play, your involvement has already fractured the timeline. It's like putting together a broken glass. The pieces will fit together, but there will still be seams and there'll still be missing gashes. What this does is create small pinpointed changes in the timeline. Certain characters may have passed away that didn't before. Some people may have got different powers than they did before. What this could do if DC does this is allow them to let Ben Affleck's Batman go. We can have a built-in world universe reason for Ben Affleck to no longer be playing Batman. If Henry Cavill doesn't come back, Flashpoint can be the reason there's another Superman just looks different. There's the Flash as a character has retcons and reboots and all of that built into his powers, and they understand that. These people that are trying to push this direction now, this would fix all of the continuity errors. This gives them the potential to fix all of the continuity errors in the current DCEU, just because right now the focus is not on the shared universe as a whole, but building these characters up. They do want to, they are admittedly considering bringing everyone together again down the road once they have their foot back on the ground and they're standing tall and firm. That is still something they want to do. That's still in the cards completely. That is not an idea that is gone. And with the worlds of DC, as with the the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film, they want to make disconnected films as well, because the DC is best known in the comics for not just its shared universe, but the multiverse, all of the different versions of characters on different versions of Earth where different things have played out. And the speedsters are the ones that connect all of that together. And I want to point out Ezra Miller's statements in a recent interview that when he was doing a promotion for Fantastic Beasts 2. Now, this is transcripted because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss a beat on what he said. They were talking about Fantastic Beasts, and then they also started talking to him about the process and the development currently on The Flash. And his response is, it's getting really good now. Anyone who knows anything about Barry Allen knows that he's always late, but when he arrives, he gets stuff done. And that's definitely how this film's production schedule is proceeding. We're a little late, but the reason why we are late is that this is the God's honest truth. The reason we are late is because we are all, and myself included, we are meticulously focused on making a movie that is just not one of the greatest superhero movies that we can possibly make. This movie is also going to be a gift to the fans. This movie is going to be a real pure offering to the fans of this material. And we've hit a couple of points, and here's where we kind of get onto the tension building around the script. We've hit a couple of points in the script's development where we've looked at it and gone, this isn't it yet. It has to be, and we're talking about sparking a whole new universe, which is not just the DC multiverse. It's also the Speedster multiverse. And the Speedsters are the ones who connect all of the separate pieces, because Marvel is a universe, just one world, all the same characters in it. Okay, I'm gonna put an asterisk on that and note that Marvel has condensed itself to 2 universes, the last I've known, and destroyed their multiverse. They only have the main timeline, 616, and the Ultimate Universe now. They used to have their own multiverse, but that's not a built-in main plot point of the entirety of their canon. It exists, but it's not always acknowledged. In DC, even in Rebirth and New 52, remnants of their other versions of these characters exist permanently. Side note, ended, continuing. DC is a multiverse. All these different stories with different realities, characters, and versions of these characters, and the Speedsters are the ones who move through it all. They are the connecting bridge between all these different collaged parts. And so I'm really delighted about how focused everyone is on getting that just right. And I'm really devoted to that as well. And honestly, we won't make the film unless it's going to be this consummate, beautiful offering to the fans and to everybody. I mean, we're just going to make a fantastic movie, but we're really focused on making it this super gift to DC fans. The interviewer says the fans are really excited, and then he ends that whole conversation with not as excited as me. This is the Speedsters, Flash, Barry Allen, Wally West, Bart Allen, every one of the Flashes, involvements, their purpose in the universe, Reverse Flash, Zoom, Dark Flash, Black Flash, the Death, all of them. Who's the one on the freaking skis? Black Racer, I think, is just like all of these the speedsters in the DC universe are the thread to time, to making changes in the universe. They interweave all versions of the characters. And that would fix if they wrote this the way I think they did. And I don't think Warner Brothers in the original roadmap would have done Flashpoint if they didn't want to wipe out the original timeline. Because as recently we've found out, the ending to the third part of the original Justice League plan was the destruction of Earth. If you haven't seen it, Kevin Smith talks about a lot of these in one of his podcasts that came out, I think a month or two ago, where he goes into details about things he's heard from the cast and crew that worked on the film, along with Jim Lee and his sketches for what they had outlined for Zack Snyder's original 3-part plan, with the third one being the post-apocalyptic battle after Darkseid himself has destroyed the Earth. Now, however you feel about them doubling down on the destruction level of these films doesn't matter at this point. That they had built in, and it was set up in BVS, that the Flash is going back to try to change time. Otherwise, they would not have had in that original roadmap Flashpoint involved. And just because Warner Brothers doesn't know how to react to criticism, doesn't know how to react to everything they have done up until this point has been 100% reactionary and none of it planned. And that is clear with how Justice League turned out and how this new plan seems to be working up by trying to just have fun. Regardless of that, if they do try to bring these characters down in the towards the end, because we have the Matt Reeves Batman movie coming out too, which is still in the DC universe. It is a standalone film, meaning it isn't tied to anyone else's story, but it does exist in the DCEU. But it will not have Ben Affleck, and we would either have to just accept that there is a new actor, that these timed events may just change. If they retcon any of his history that we've known so far from the movies we've seen so far, that could all be hand-woven away. Just whoosh, it's gone with Barry Allen and The Flash. The Flash is literally DC and Warner Brothers get out of jail free card for any mistakes they ever make in the continuity of these films. But they don't understand the characters. They don't understand the weapons they're wielding. Again, I'm going to focus on this really hard. Just because the film itself has a darker tone has no bearing on whether or not Barry Allen will be a dark character, because he won't be. That's not how Ezra Miller played him. That's not how he's built into it. He is a pure soul living in a messed up world, and unfortunately he has to come to terms with that, and that's part of his growth as the Flash. The Flash isn't even one of my favorite DC heroes. He's not even one of my favorite. He's maybe top 10 of my favorite superheroes, but it's just the general understanding of who and what the Flash is and how so many people are fixating on this dark thing. And nobody's upset about any of the dark movies that work. The Dark Knight series, none of that stuff. Nobody talks about those. The Marvel Cinematic Universe even has really dark storylines told with lighthearted characters. Having a dark story or tone doesn't take away from the characters. As long as the character is consistent, a character of the Flash in this universe has been introduced as the Ezra Miller version, who is lighthearted, goofy, jokey, quippy, all that stuff. He is lighthearted. He can have a dark tone and have a consistent character. Marvel does this in many of their movies, Thor Ragnarok being a huge example. That is the end point to this discussion. That is the cherry on top to what I'm just trying to get at. That is the point I'm trying to get across, is people need to think about the greater picture, the character himself and his function to the comics, to the universe, to everything. Because, like I said, done right, this will fix all of Warner Brothers' problems. And if they keep track with how things are going now with their movies, with the initial reports of Shazam and all of that stuff, with them finally getting some good critical responses and revenue and turnouts to these films. People are turning around on their opinion of the DC universe. That is their way to wipe away the stains that have been left on this legacy, and allowing them to move forward, revisit these characters without any of that having to lay in the back of your mind when you're watching it. They can change the characters, they can change the storyline, they can change the actors, and it still fits in the continuity if they use the Flash in this way to create this ripple effect that retcons their continuity. Because the thing about it that bothers me so much, and it's just a nitpicking thing, is they are picking and choosing which elements of this cinematic universe, again, which it still is, they are picking and choosing which ones continue. They are keeping the ones that are well received. Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, not getting recast. We're recasting Batman. We're potentially recasting Cavill. No one's recasting Gal Gadot. No one's recasting Jason Momoa. And if you recast the rest of that team, and then you can't have them interact. You can't without some kind of built-in reason or retcon to either explain the differences, because they're talking about doing a younger Batman, introducing a younger Bruce Wayne. If we're keeping Jason Momoa as Aquaman, we're keeping Wonder Woman, and then later they meet a younger Bruce Wayne, how do you explain that? They've met an older Bruce Wayne. The way you explain that is with Flashpoint. The changes he made to the timeline made it to where Batman became Batman much earlier in his life, and instead either was born later, or he became Batman at a different point in time, or something happens to where Bruce Wayne's not even Batman at this point. That gives you the leeway to make changes to your existing timeline and it be part of the plot. I'm just rambling and repeating myself at this point. I've been saying this since Flashpoint was first announced, that this is the direction they need to go after how everything bombed after Justice League. It was their get out of jail free card, man, and when they decided they were going to change, they changed the title of the film, they changed the tone they were going for that film. They just needed to let that one thing happen. That was the one thing they didn't need to change if they still wanted to have this connected universe. And they're trying to have the cake and eat it too. And in the long run, that's only going to pose problems for themselves and the fans and the people that have been following this from the beginning, the people that are following the source material and the comics since their inception. And yeah, this is something they really need to consider, and I want to get this out there because a lot of people apparently just aren't thinking about it, or thinking about this completely the wrong way. So I'm going to end it here, and I want to know what you guys think. I know I've been rambling for a long time now, but in the comments below, please let me know what you think, how you feel about my take on this. How do you think Warner Brothers will respond? Anything at all, please leave those thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about this, a civil, nice, happy little conversation. It's the internet. That won't happen, but I can dream. Anyway, this is the first in a couple of rant videos that I might actually be making. This I was just on Twitter earlier today, and this just triggered me so hard that I just had to talk about it because people just don't understand. And that's it. Anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out, having this conversation with me. If you're still here, if you liked the video, feel free to go check out any of my other reactions and the other things that I've talked about. Please give a like and a subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.